Great. Welcome, everybody, to the Marin Municipal Water District Board meeting for June 16, 2026. Can I have a roll call, please?
Good evening. Director Matt Sampson.
Here.
Director Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
Director Diana Mayer.
Here.
Vice President Larry Russell.
Here.
And President Jed Smith.
Here. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any public comments on the agenda?
Not on the agenda.
Great. And a roll call, please.
Director Sampson.
Yes.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Vice President Russell.
Aye.
President Smith.
Aye.
Thank you.
And any comments, public comments on non-agenda matters?
Yes, there's one, Mr. Phil Sauter.
Good afternoon. A few weeks ago, I noticed a recent fall off in our daily imports of Russian River water. I wasn't sure why, as we were entering the summer period where outdoor watering kicks in and our daily production had increased by more than 50% from 14 million gallons a day to over 22 million gallons a day. But in 2025, we were bringing in 7 million gallons a day from the Russian River, or 31% of our daily total. While in the same period in 2026, we were bringing in only 3 million gallons a day, or just 14% of our daily total. The decrease wasn't because our reservoirs are in better shape and we couldn't use any more water. They were the same as they were the previous year. And it's not because we were expecting any rain. I wasn't sure why we were bringing in half the usual water from Sonoma. Fast forward 3 weeks and the numbers still seem out of whack. This week, our daily potable water production is running at 24 million gallons a day, showing our continued summer use of potable water for landscape irrigation. Of that, only 4 million gallons a day are coming from the Russian River, and 20 million gallons a day are coming from our reservoirs. Instead of the 10 million gallons a day we imported in 2025, or 40% of our daily total, this week's 4 million gallons a day is only 16% of our daily total. With only a 2-year supply in our reservoirs and a major capital project being planned to increase our imports of Russian River water, it seems strange to be cutting back on imports now when they're readily available. So unless there's a reason that hasn't been made public yet or I haven't stumbled across, I'd like to request we currently use available Russian River water for our summer landscaping and reduce the unnecessarily rapid drawdown from our reservoirs. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Great. We'll have director and general managers comments. Ranjiv, anything to add?
Nothing. Thank you.
No.
All good.
Matt?
Yep, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Watershed Group who threw a really good employee appreciation event. It was quite the eccentric setup, and I'm sure takedown took a long time, but it was appreciated. Everyone was out having a good time. Could have done with like 5 degrees cooler on the heat, but other than that, it was a great day out there, so it was good to see everybody.
Great. Director Russell?
No, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add to that event. I thought was outstanding, well done, beautiful setting. It was an honor to be there and good stewards of that of this watershed. So thank you, team, for putting that together. That was well done. Director, I'm sorry, you might be a director soon. General Ornstein. Okay, great. So we'll move on to our board committee reports. I'm not sure there were any this time.
We did have a Lagunitas TAC did
Right,
meet.
yeah, on Friday, yep.
And that was on the 5th, I believe, of June. And I was able to attend most of it, but I had a technical issue with part of it. But talked about some reintroduction of beaver and beaver advocacy work. Also highlighted the work that we're doing on Lagunitas Creek as part of the next phase of the restoration. And the exciting part is I got some really, really good news on the fish populations this year. And so that was highlighted in the general manager's report. So I just want to highlight that for the public, that some good work's being done. We're seeing some results.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving on to our consent items. We have 3 consent items tonight. One is approval of our insurance renewal. The second is, the first is our general manager's report, and then our insurance renewal, our Quitcom right-of-way in Marinwood and San Rafael, and then Woodland Ave pipeline extension. And I believe that is it.
Yeah.
Approval of the minutes. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the consent items?
President, so I just like
Yep,
to comment
comments.
on the insurance item,
Yep.
if that's okay, if that's
Yep,
appropriate.
go
now.
for it.
even though it's in consent, this is a really big deal for us as we look to renew our insurance, and the approach we're taking right now is seeing much better results for the district. And highlighted in the finance committee about direct correlation to the work that's being done on our watershed and around our infrastructure is resulting in better coverage, better deductibles with not much of an increase at all when we look at the total package. That's a really big deal in this environment when people are getting dropped left and right or not renewed throughout the county, throughout the state. And so for us to come back and do this and show that our dollars being invested are having meaningful return, it's really good news. And so what I'd love to hear as we looked further is what work specifically was being done, what can we do next, and how can we continue to buy down risk, if that's even an option, as we look in this risk transfer industry world that we're living in. So follow up on that would be greatly appreciated, but really good news.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'll add on to that. As I did mention in a previous meeting, I thought that was an outstanding report, good move, good change, a lot of focus on our specific issues. And as much as we can have the brokers and the insurance folks teach us about what we can do, not just reducing rates, but how we can better mitigate risk in our buildings and our land would be great. So we're open to listen. With that, any other comments? Okay, a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any public comments on the consent matters?
There are none.
Great. Roll call.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Smith, please.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. So now we're moving on to item 7, which is a public hearing after the consent items, and we're going to discuss our urban water management plan and water shortage contingency plan.
Good evening, Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director, with a report on the Urban Water Management Plan tonight. I'm joined by Nick Bussey, is our Associate Water Resources Specialist. Nick's been working on the Urban Water Management Plan, and our consultant EKI, Dawn Flores with EKI, has been helping us through this process. And so I'll go through the first couple of slides, and then Nick will take it from there. We're going to touch on the background and purpose of the Urban Water Management Plan. The schedule, really what we need to know about the schedule tonight is pretty limited. It's that the plan is due in July. So that's why we're here for you this evening. We'll talk a little bit about the basis for the plan, which is population growth and how that drives demand, and then sort of walk you through the results in terms of the assessment of the water supply. And then as the last component of the Urban Water Management Plan, you have the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, which is the plan that we want to have in place in the event that we hit drought conditions ahead. So we'll take a quick look at that. There are no changes being proposed for that, but it's a kind of a brief review of that. So before we get going, kind of on the background of the Urban Water Management Plan, the name sounds sort of foreboding and that it's all encompassing, this management plan around water. It's really a requirement for water agencies to perform this sort of check of demand and supply over this long period of time. It's very prescriptive in its process in the way in which we go through and look at whether we can meet demand and supply. And we've got a fair amount of latitude in terms of how we do that. One way to think about it might be it's sort of a litmus test. You know, the paper is going to turn one color or another. The kind of purpose of a plan like this is a very broad, high-level review of water supply and demand over a long period of time, 25 years or so. To account for that long time, we do tend to go somewhat on the conservative side. Again, this is a check of water supply against demand. So we're not trying to minimize demand in these processes. We, in fact, want to have a fairly robust demand assessment that's reasonable. And we think we've done that. These plans, and we've had some comments, which is kind of an interesting thing for me because I've been doing this a little while now in terms of urban water management plans. I don't recall ever seeing a comment letter on an urban water management plan. And we've gotten 3 for one plan, so we're clearly doing something right. But we appreciate, of course, the commenters taking the time and effort, and the Sierra Club, the Nicasio Landowners Association, and the Marine Conservation League. We do appreciate their attention to detail and thoughtfulness of their comments. But a lot of the comments are really addressing this notion of demand, and that, this plan, this urban water management plan, is going to somehow drive our budget and our rates, and it's unfair to our taxpayers and this sort of a thing. And I think the board understands that every time we go out for rates, there's a cost of service analysis that's done. So that's a different level of planning over a very short-term horizon that we want to make sure we get the cost of service correct. It's really got nothing to do with the urban water management plan. Same with our budgeting process. Engineering are developing their plans ultimately from their water system master plan, which is a long-term review of the infrastructure in our water system. Same thing with water treatment plants and the water treatment plant master plan. Those are the types of things that feed into our budget, not this kind of broad overview of, do we have enough water to meet projected demand over the next 25, 30 years? So the urban water management plan, it's important, I think, to understand, it is not intended for sort of actionable water supply planning. If you recall, we went through a rather lengthy process since 2020, looking at the strategic water supply assessment. That's water supply planning, where we're really interrogating climate change and our demands, our conservation, all of those things were factored into the strategic water supply assessment plan. And there are other plans that we engage in that you'll have sort of checked off along the way, things like local hazard mitigation plan, and those account for, various disaster and risk scenarios that we come up with. So while I don't want to say the urban water management plan is completely useless, it's certainly an interesting opportunity for us to look at demand. And we've, I think, presented a reasonable case for demand going forward over the planning period here. So with that sort of premise, I'm going to sort of turn it over to Nick to kind of walk us through some of the basic elements of the plan. And if you have any questions, just stop us along the way.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Nick Bussey, Associate Water Resources Specialist. As Paul was kind of touching on, one of the first prescriptive parts of this urban water management planning process is looking at population growth over the planning horizon, which is 2025 through 2050. And kind of the industry standard is using this Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, Plan Bay Area 2050, which is a comprehensive planning document that looks at census data. It includes regional housing needs assessment, migration patterns. It's a very thoughtful report that shows population projections over a long period of time. And as you can see on this chart, the solid blue line here is the actual population. It kind of projects backwards to 2010 to the current population in 2025 of about 190,000. And then the dashed blue line to the right is the projected ABAG population. It's a bit steeper for the first 10 years, and that's because of the regional housing needs assessment, which kind of culminates in 2035. And then it's a more gradual sloped rate from 2035 to 2050. And once we have population growth, we can take a second look at demands. And demands are really a two-part process. You have the population from ABAG, and then how much water will this population use, and how much water are these specific sectors using? And that's what the demand factor really is. It's just a way of assigning a certain amount of water to a specific kind of an account, like single-family homes. And we've looked at it and we've established it at 10% over 2024 actual demand. And an example of how that could work, so a single family home has a demand factor of about 228 gallons per day per account. And then ABAG forecasts about 11,000 new single family homes through 2050. So if you multiply how many new homes by how much on average those homes are using, 2,900 acre feet get added to that sector's demand. And that really feeds into the last part of the planning process, which is the water supply reliability assessment. And it's a prescribed analysis procedure. There's 3 scenarios that are included in that. It's a normal year, a single dry year, and a 5-year extended drought. And it evaluates available water supplies. It's surface water, imported water, recycled water. And what it's really doing is it's comparing the historic marin hydrology with the projected demands from the report. In this table here, it's an example of the projected local surface water supply. Each column here is one of the years, 2030 through 2050. And then each of the rows, like the first row is normal year, and that's how much water would be available in a normal year. And then the subsequent rows are single dry year and then the extended drought. And I guess one important piece on this is the water supply is adequate to meet all of these demands across these scenarios. So taking a deeper look at the first part of the reliability assessment, the normal and the single dry years, we found analogs in the marin hydrology for a normal year and a single dry year. Those would be water years 2004 and water years 1997. And what this does is it looks at the available water supply constraints, historic runoff from those years, environmental releases, evaporation, and then it compares that to what those projected demands are that we covered earlier. The first table here, it shows, for example, the normal water supply. It's a bit difficult to read, but it's the same, the 2030 through 2050. And that first row is the supply total, so how much water is available. And the second row is how much water would be used. And for both of these scenarios, it shows that there's a surplus across all years for the planning horizon. And then the final prescripted drought scenario is the 5-year drought. And this uses drought hydrology from 1987 through 1991. And it's a similar table to the prior two that we looked at. It's just instead of a single year, it's 5 years. So the rows are still supply totals and use totals. And when we look at all 5 years across the 25-year planning horizon, we still find the results show that there's available water supply sufficient for all demands. So this leads into the code allows a water agency to provide their own drought assessment as an option. And we decided to include a stress test that aligns with SWUSA, the Strategic Water Supply Assessment. This is in line with the hydrology that was used in the 4-year drought assessment from SWUSA, water years 20 and 21, and then followed by 76 and 77. And this is a bit different of a table, but it's the final 4 years of the planning horizon, 2047 through 2050. And then the columns here are the beginning of your storage. It's the total amount of supply available at the beginning of that year. The column after that shows the projected demand for that year. And then water supplies, that's how much water is added from that hydrology and what we could purchase from Sonoma. And the difference between the two, like if you see for the first year, 2047, there's about 40,000 acre feet of demand and 35,000 of supply. So the remainder of that deficit would be drawn from the beginning of your storage and carried through. And this process is repeated 2047 through 2050. And the results of this analysis align with what SWUSA shows. In the final year, in 2050, there is a shortfall.
Yeah, so I think the purpose of including this is just urban water management plans where we're saying, yeah, we've got enough water to meet all demands. It's a little bit misleading in that those tables don't really talk about reservoir storage levels and some of the performance standards that the district has set for the reservoir storage levels at the end of 4 years aren't really addressed in those tables. And it's one of the challenges of using the urban water management plan for us in terms of water supply planning. Whereas this sort of table, this was very much similar to what we had in SWUSA. And what's important to us as markers, and what you'll see in the water shortage contingency plan triggers that come up, it's all about what's in our reservoir system for us. That's really what's dominating and telling us how our water supply is doing. So with that segue, the water shortage contingency plan, again, it's part of the urban water management plan. It's a requirement for us to develop one. We came out of the drought in 21, 22 and spent that time developing this water shortage contingency plan. So based on our experiences, what we saw during the drought and how we had to adapt the existing water shortage contingency plan to meet, to make sure we had enough water going forward. So we've used that experience. We brought it to the board in 2023. It was adopted at that time, and we're going to readopt it so that it's now realigned with the urban water management plan every 5 years. And we're not proposing any changes to that. So what am I talking about? This slide, there's a lot of information on this slide. So just to go through it briefly, looking at the tables, water shortage contingency plans, you need some way to sort of start them. Like, when are you in trouble, right? So you've got to choose something. We've chosen reservoir storage levels. And so you can see in that table, the first table here on the right, 70,000 acre feet. And then we're indicating that would, if we're at that level on April 1st, again, we choose April 1st as the date by which we look at the trigger, because that's when most of our rain has fallen. Something like 88% of our rain has typically occurred by April. So April 1st is a good date for us to consider how our reservoirs are looking. And so 70,000 acre feet. And so then you can see the different shortage levels as the reservoir levels go down. And then, you'd be wondering, okay, well, how often do we hit these? This 70,000 acre feet out of 80,000 acre feet seems like a pretty high trigger level, Paul. Are we going to hit this thing every year or what? It turns out that since 1983, we would have hit that level about 12 times. So it's about 28% of the time where we kind of would be in this sort of early warning stage of, hey, is it dry? And that's how good our water supply has been for us in terms of keeping the reservoirs full. And then as you go down to stage 2, it's 7 times since 1983. And then we barely even get into stage 3. So with these triggers, we think we're going to be pretty close to staying in voluntary conservation modes in stage 1 and stage 2 conservation measures. So we think these triggers still work for us based on how often we hit them throughout time since the reservoir system was expanded. And they'll help us having this plan in place. All of these shortage levels come with attendant measures. So there'll be, things like car washing, and when you get to the higher levels, there are even more restrictions around irrigation and things like that. That's all built into the plan, to the water shortage contingency plan, so that we don't have to invent it on the fly. Of course, if we decide to, we could change it. So if there was some feedback from the public, something wasn't working, we can certainly adapt and change. So this is the sort of the trigger levels and the frequency at which we would have hit them over the past 42 years or so. So tonight, staff are recommending that, of course, we conduct a public hearing on the urban water management plan and the water shortage contingency plan, and that we'd ask that the board, subject to the hearing, approve a resolution to adopt the 2025 urban water management plan and a separate resolution to adopt the water shortage contingency plan. And I guess before we just go into the hearing, I would say back to the comments that we've received. We will be including those comment letters as part of sort of the appendices to the plan, just to reflect that we've received them. Staff will consider them. I don't think at this time there are any major changes, but the Sierra Club did make a comment that we had not included, I think it was ARC and in-system improvements as reasonably foreseeable water supplies. We did include, of course, the roadmap and a link to the roadmap, but we didn't specify, when we thought those projects might come online. As you know, ARC is a very complicated project, but we think that we can probably accommodate that comment. So we might add a couple of sentences to the urban water management plan. It won't change the outcome of the plan in any way. It'll be a very minor change were we to accommodate that note from the Sierra Club. So with that, concludes our presentation.
Great. Thank you. You want to start us off, Matt?
Sure. Thank you for for the presentation, but also thank you for the understanding of what an urban water master plan is and what it isn't, and what we can use to help make decisions with going forward. You know, to follow up on your last comment about ARC and the in-system improvements, realistically, as we move forward with this project, ARC is going to be a multi-year project, and in-system improvements are going to be in perpetuity as we move forward. And we're going to be doing this again in 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a more appropriate time to capture those projects, potentially, depending on progress, how they're going. We could consider doing it then.
That was certainly our initial feeling, but we could, if the board desired, accommodate, a response to the Sierra Club's letter, but it'd be a minor change. It wouldn't amount to much, but
it's also an assumption that the project is going to be bearing fruit within 5 years.
yes.
And I think I'm not comfortable making that assumption in this document. We can take another bite at the apple in 5 years is where I would like to go from there on that.
Sounds good.
And then one of the other comments we received was the inclusion of 11,000 single-family homes in Marin as part of the RENA process, and that number seems to be more far-fetched. Did the RENA report talk about multifamily as well as a separate category of home construction? Or was it did it just give single-family home?
So with respect to single family and multifamily, what historically Marin has seen is more in the 90-10 split, right? 90% single, 10% multi.
Yep.
My understanding is today that number has changed more to sort of 70-30. So what we're seeing is this trend. And what we do expect that trend to move over time. So in 5 years' time, I wouldn't be surprised if we were sitting here. We were looking at, for this plan, a split of 50-50. So it's not, an outrageous assumption given that we're at 70-30 today. In the next 5 years, that could well change to a greater split in terms of multifamily. Might be 70-30 to multifamily at that time.
But either way, we're going to see an increase in population.
Yeah,
expected.
and again, back to sort of the purpose of the plan is not necessarily to get the housing numbers and the water use for each dwelling unit correct. It's just sort of to make sure a conservative assessment of demand, and we have the supply that we can meet that demand. So a 50-50 assessment in terms of splitting between single family homes and multifamily homes, we felt was a reasonable assumption, conservative to be sure. But that it met the spirit of the urban water management plan, that it was a conservative assessment of demand and our supplies are capable of meeting that. So were we to change that split to even 10% single family, 90%, all it would show is that we can still meet the water supply needs for the community.
Great. Thank you for that follow-up information. That's all I have.
Great. Director Russell, any comments for us?
Yes. I thought all the time that was because my birthday was April 1st that the date was picked. But it's good to see that the triggers are still working. We took a deep dive into this about 5 years ago, or maybe even longer. And I was quite curious. And indeed, the triggers, which I don't know, Paul, when do you think they were developed? 30 years ago?
Yep.
Maybe longer.
Yeah.
They had good vision at that time, and they did understand the system and acted appropriately in setting those triggers. And like I say, when we took a deep dive into them the last time, indeed, they were the right numbers at the right time.
Great. Any other comments? Director Russell? All good?
No, I'm good.
Thanks. Kush.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Paul, Nick, Don, for all the work. It's interesting, when I meet with our customers, constituents, probably one of the most common remarks I get is that, are you sure you are thinking about future population increases and housing increases, particularly given all the publicity around the state mandates? And, it's always helpful to try to, to tell people that actually we're required to do that. That is a state requirement. And, I was obviously aware that we have the master plan from 5 years ago that I often point people to say, we do understand what the additional housing demands are going to be. And we do feel confident, in our ability to supply water for those additional units. So I think that conservative approach to estimating what our future need is going to be helps with that argument, that we really are trying to, in this particular case of the management plan, we are trying to be conservative because things are really hard to predict. Someone said it's really hard to predict. Things are hard to predict, particularly about the future, right? So, I appreciate the difference between the goals of the urban water management plan and our strategic water supply assessment that led to the integrated roadmap, which is really what's guiding our water supply development and not the master plan, as you noted, Paul, in your intro. But maybe just one thing that I got stuck on. I didn't appreciate the nuance that DWR really focuses on available surface water supplies for us. Or at least that's what's shown in some of these. So this is where I just wanted to come back to slide 10, Nick, because I got a little confused here. If in our stress test, when we use the drought scenario from the strategic water supply assessment, at the end, our storage, in 2050, we are, at negative 5,000 acre feet. Now, I'm assuming that is we're managing because of additional imported water supplies that are going to cover that. But that's where I got a little stuck.
Oh, so the negative would indicate essentially that our reservoir in this scenario, which does not include any future water supplies.
Yeah.
And remember, it includes the strategic water supply hydrology, right? So those 4 very dry years of 2020, 21, 76, and 77, coupled with the population increase from ABAG.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's what's driving these numbers. So there's, were that situation to occur, this is sort of where we would be in the absence of additional water supply.
In the absence of additional
with all of our current supplies.
Yeah.
including the water that our allocation from
Yes.
Sonoma Water.
Correct. But not including ARC or in-system improvements, the roadmap supplies that we're working on.
Yeah, okay, that I understand. I feel like 8,500 acre feet was sort of the number.
It is. This is not intended to be an exact
Okay.
replica. Of course, the projections that we're using in SWUSA have a slightly different basis from 2020 than the projections that we're using here. But it was just an attempt to import the hydrology from SWUSA so that we have a similar type of drought event and impose that on the population forecasts that ABAG have just come out with.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, good. Then I think, just to repeat, I hope that, our customers and stakeholders will understand the different objectives for these different water supply planning exercises. Thank you.
Great.
Paul, can you say a little more? I think you probably know that one of the critiques of the plan was that it didn't adequately account for a reduced demand that we have fortunately created in Marin due to all of our water efficiency efforts. And I wondered if you could just speak to that a little bit, if you think it does, and if it does account for that, how it accounts for it.
The plan specifically does not include active conservation measures. And again, it's just a conservative approach. This is a litmus test. Do you have enough water to meet demand? If you've got enough water to meet a higher demand, then you've got certainly enough water to meet a lower demand. On my earlier comments, Director Mayer, I omitted to mention yet another plan that we spent a lot of time developing and are very proud of because it's been quite successful today, is the water efficiency master plan.
Mhm.
That's where we really get down into the details of what the plan is, how much water savings we can expect for each measure. Again, though, it's really difficult and challenging for us to sit there and say, yes, 5,000 acre feet of conservation can occur by 2050. We certainly hope it can, but
Mhm.
achieving that and counting it as a water supply today presents a bit of a risk for us. So
I think what I heard was the question. I mean, you're responding to another issue,
Yeah.
which is baking in here future conservation efforts. I thought the question was our baseline demand that was used in here is a bit higher, perhaps, than today's demand.
That's another question, but
Yeah.
I can certainly answer that. I thought it was more about our conservation that we'd achieved.
No, I think Ben's right. And I think
I see.
I think maybe the concern too is about
Right.
what will trying to think of the right word here. Um, what will spin off from this report if demand is over?
Estimated.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good point. And it's a common challenge with urban water management plans. If you go back over the years, when, demands are starting to go up, urban water management plans start with a slightly higher demand than when demands are sort of on the downswing. Urban water management plans over the years will start with a slightly lower demand. In this case, Nick mentioned that as we were thinking about demand, the demand that was selected is equivalent to the 2024 demand plus about 10%. So again, in terms of being unreasonable or reasonableness, it's a pretty reasonable number for us. We haven't really gone out on a limb and added thousands and thousands of acre feet. It's a 10% increase in demand over 2024.
Thank you.
And what's our projection for demand this year?
I don't have this from the previous.
2026, that's going to be done in a week.
I'm
I think it's about 20,000 acre feet.
I was going to say 22, but yeah.
I think it's about 20. Is it 22? So from your demand projections here, you're kicking us off like with a wrong number right out of the chute, right? Because it shows here 26 over 25. So why would we not have as accurate a possible presentation to the state government as we can?
Well, I mean, again,
Why add 10% from 2024 when we already know 2026 is way lower?
One way to think about it, whether it's this exercise or, for example, the budget, either one, we know, right? We talk about all the time what demand is, and to some extent, it's out of our control and it's somewhat variable. So when you have variability, you want to try and capture, in this instance, a conservative approach. And we would do it, and we will do it in budgeting too, as we think about forecasting the revenues coming in. And also, I thought it was interesting, as Paul noted, we're still on this apparent rebound. It's still unclear where it's going to go. It felt like it was leveling off, and then recently it kind of started to bump up a bit. So I think it's, the term reasonably conservative, I think, is where we tried to hit our baseline assumptions. And, I don't think it would materially change the result. It wouldn't if we went from, right, we saw we were 5,000+ acre feet short that fourth year, which mirrors lesser so than the water supply, strategic water supply assessment. So if we took 2,000 away, if we want, it would still show a shortage that we likely would want to address in the same fashion. So it is difficult, like nailing down precisely demand. And I think looking at trends and looking at the past is an important consideration in that.
Yeah, got it. I definitely read the letters that poked holes in this, and I tried to figure out intentions because it's clear that this urban water management plan is not one that's going to direct policy necessarily. It's not there to change our decisions. And I also think about, like, maybe some people don't want to put more water in their reservoir for completely other reasons, and they're trying to create this as a reason to create political angst. So without understanding exactly people's intentions, I do think that we need to be as accurate as we can. And I like the concept of conservative, but I think we went too far on this. I think we started at a high number, and we're about to invest $20 million in AMI that has proven reduction. Our demand management programs are working well. Our goals are clear, and I think we could be better at goals. And I think that this should try to follow our intentions. I think our intentions are to not just look at supply, obviously, but to really be thoughtful about mitigating demand as much as we can through water efficiency programs, which we do extraordinarily well. So I wouldn't mind a relook at this. But I also understand that times of a constraint, and that that really this may not have a massive impact on our decisions. I think I would have suggested that you guys brought this a lot sooner than 14 days before it's due. So I don't know if we can change this before it gets submitted, but open to other ideas.
We could. I'd say I'm not opposed if the board wanted to, certainly, to let the water board know we're going to be a month late on this one, but it's going to get in, and we take a slap if there's even that. One thing I'm thinking about is, by design, we took a conservative approach on the strategic water supply assessment. To take a dissimilar approach on this would result in likely results that are in conflict.
Right.
And does that make sense from a policy standpoint versus, as a district, we decided, following this historic drought and uncertainty associated with climate change, that we want to take a conservative approach to water supply planning. So that was kind of the spirit of these assumptions, but reasonably conservative. And I would say if that litmus test isn't met for you, that would, for the board, that would be a consideration.
All right. Well, love to hear public comments. Any other
Yeah, I
comments?
just want to follow up, 'cause I hear where you're coming from. And I think, for me, I'm having a hard time quantifying what some of these things are, as they're not fully baked out yet. And that's why I go back to the 5-year runway here. In 5 years, AMI hopefully will be up and running, and we'll really understand demand. But the other thing that wasn't talked about too much here is a changing climate that we have no control over. And that could funnel into the same thing. And should we start projecting based on what we think that is? And I think that's when we start getting a slippery slope. So we invest a ton of money in conservation, and our folks are doing a great job. But I think with AMI, we'll really have the bow on it, and we'll be able to implement it to the next one, is where I'm feeling.
Yeah, maybe if I could also just reflect, Jed, on your comments, which they make a lot of sense. But I think, when we're trying to demonstrate to the state that we're thinking carefully about our ability to continue to supply water, leaning towards, I don't know if worst case scenario is the best way to frame it, but being conservative, because a lot of what we're planning, as Matt said, may not, come to fruition. So I think, I think there is, I think it's good for us to understand where we would be if things were not as productive, with both in terms of demand reduction and new supply development. If we don't hit some of those targets, I hope we do, but if we don't, are we still going to be, how much hurt are we going to be facing with additional housing and population growth? So I actually think this is a useful exercise, looking at it from a more conservative perspective.
Great. Any public comments?
You would like to open the public hearing?
Let's open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I'd like to also remind people the 3-minute times. We have people on Zoom as well. So the first speakers are Phil Sauter and Martha Davis.
Thank you for the presentation. It wasn't especially surprising to see our projected demands going up in the future, even though they've been steadily decreasing over the past 4 years. And even though most other water districts are focusing specifically on conservation of potable water in the years ahead, especially for outdoor use, Marin Water is the only district I'm aware of that's projecting per capita use to be the same 20 years from now as it is today, and one of the few water districts without a funded plan to use more recycled water. However, it is still jarring to find past water use trending down, stopping in the current year and then start climbing back up in future years. I found a graph just like that in the 455-page consultant's report in this week's agenda packet. By way of explanation, there's this comment. While projections account for passive savings, the district has taken a more conservative approach to demand projections by not accounting for savings associated with future active conservation measures. As Paul says, passive savings are those that customers take, while active savings are from district funded and sponsored activities. It goes on to say, however, savings associated with all historic conservation efforts are embedded into the demand projections. This approach is conservative as it projects the higher projected demands used for future supply planning. So there is a stated bias, and it is used for future supply planning. Of course, by assigning zero value to the district's future active conservation efforts, even though conservation is the district's stated #1 water supply option, we end up over forecasting both demand and the need for capital projects to support it. Clearly, this would be unfair to district customers who will pay for perhaps unnecessary capital projects, as well as a $3 million annual budget for a 9-person demand management team. It's also unfair to the team members who are among the best in the business to have their outstanding conservation work ignored in the district's water demand forecasts. I hope these forecasts get a tighter review for accuracy and reasonableness before they're submitted to the state. And finally, kudos to staff and for Director Smith for calling out this bias. And please quantify it to make sure it doesn't find its way into future supply planning. We need to know exactly how much active conservation we're ignoring. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Martha Davis speaking on behalf of the Nicasio Landowners Association. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the district's draft plan. We wish your staff had followed the state guidance to hold a public informational workshops on the draft, but this did not happen. For the record, I've reviewed hundreds of these plans in my career, supervised the preparation of many, and testified in Congress as to why accuracy matters. Understandably, your staff want their estimates of future potable demand to be conservative, but the plan's assumptions are so conservative that even their belt and suspenders have belt and suspenders. The plan's fatal flaw lies in the assumed water needs for the RHNA housing construction. It isn't just that it's roughly 11,000 single-family homes will be built over the next 25 years. We can debate the mix. Here's the problem. Staff assumes that all of these new homes will use the same amount of water as what an average single-family home used before the 2021 drought. This assumption is not accurate, as the quick survey of recent development applications shows. New housing will be denser infill development built to meet the state's highest water efficiency standards and will include minimal, if any, outdoor irrigation. Also, as many builders point out, their new construction will replace existing water use, further minimizing the net increase impact on the district. Today, a home will need about half of the 228 gallons per day per account assumed in the plan, and the building community deserves credit for all of their work to ensure efficient future water use. And that's before the super conservative assumptions are applied to the plan that minimize the water savings from passive and active water conservation. As mentioned today, even the expected savings from the adopted AMI program are not included. When all the plan's belts and suspenders are added up, the draft appears to overestimate 2050 potable water needs by more than 5,000 acre-feet per year, and correcting this overestimate would virtually erase what we saw in the shortfall described today. Of note, the plan estimates that the district's potable demand will grow by almost 4,000 acre-feet by between 2025 and 2030. I think that's your point, President Smith. And given the current water sales, do we really think that's a reasonable assumption? Further, your staff say that the plan is not intended for actionable water supply planning. I think that would come as a surprise to DWR. An approved plan serves as the primary legal reference, backing up the district's water planning models and related financial assumptions. For the ARC draft EIR, you will rely on the 2025 plan. This is why it matters that the future water demand estimates are based on defensible data. Because I've only got a few seconds left, I just agree with the concept that you delay the final approval of the 2025 plan, or as we wrote in our comment letter, provisionally adopt it today with the commitment that staff resubmit the plan for your approval in July with data that supports their assumptions, and then the reconfigured demand assumptions that are so important. Thank you very much.
Next, Mark Shahinian, Larry Minikis, and Marilyn Price. Go ahead, Mr. Shahinian.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is Mark Shahinian. I'm with the Sierra Club and representing today the San Francisco Bay Chapter's Water Committee. The Sierra Club's worked around the state to improve riparian ecosystems over the decades, including, of course, in the watersheds that MMWD operates in. This often means keeping flows in the river. UWMPs are the primary planning document for water demand and supply. They are not and should not be treated as a mere box-checking exercise. They are the basis for operations and capital decisions and planning. We see that if you look over the last 5 years at MMWD documents, you use the demand from the UWMPs in your subsequent planning. So it's really important where that demand number lands. Well, okay, so why do we care? Why is the Sierra Club bothering with this? It's because generally water agencies, including, unfortunately, MMWD, use the environment as the buffer. Let me say this again. You guys are using the environment as the buffer. So while it might make you feel safer and like you're making a proper conservative decision, what's actually happening is you're putting the environment at risk so that you feel safer. There are other better ways to do that by doing your analysis more accurately and more with more attention to detail. When I say attention to detail, let me give you a couple of illustrative examples from today's discussion. One of the staff members said that the ABAG projects the unit mix that they put into the UWMP. This is not true. ABAG does project population, but unit mix comes from an assumption made by MMWD staff and consultants. Number two, the stress test that was shown on the earlier slide, it uses the wrong demand numbers. It uses demand numbers from a previous projection, not from the projection even that you see in front of you today. So all this is to say that we find this UWMP pretty problematic and inaccurate in a lot of its details. We urge either rejection wholesale or a rejection, an approval contingent on fixing some of the errors in the UWMP. It's impressive for me to see the engagement of this board, so thank you very much for your attention here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, Larry Minikis and then Marilyn Price. Go ahead, Mr. Minikis.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for the presentation this evening. I'm sorry that I'm unable to attend in person for this important public hearing as I'm currently out of town. We appreciate the tremendous amount of work that has gone into preparing this urban management water plan. Our concern tonight is with process and timing. This is among the most important long-term and complex planning documents the district produces. It does help in some ways to guide future infrastructure investments, water supply planning, and ultimately costs borne by Marin ratepayers. Yet the board and the public have been given very little time to review both the urban water management plan and the detailed presentation that was just released. What is particularly concerning is that the work has been in development for many months. There were multiple opportunities to bring portions of the analysis before the board as informational items earlier this year, allowing questions to be raised and addressed before we reach the adoption stage this evening. The Marin Conservation League recently submitted a letter identifying several questions regarding future demand projections and the assumptions that drive them. Specifically, MCL requested additional explanation regarding projected water demand associated with future RHNA housing, assumptions about future development patterns, the continued use of historical demand factors, assumptions regarding demand rebound, and the treatment of long-term conservation savings from AMI, fixture efficiency, landscape changes, and the evolving state of conservation requirements. We believe these questions warrant a response before the plan is finalized. Recognizing the July 1st state deadline, we're not asking the board to delay compliance. Instead, we ask the board approve the plan provisionally, submit it as required, and direct staff to return by July 31st with responses to the questions identified in MCL's comment letter and recommendations regarding whether refinements to the demand model may be appropriate based on current development patterns, conservation trends, and available data. This approach would satisfy the state's deadline while ensuring stakeholders have a meaningful opportunity to participate in a process that will influence future ratepayer obligations for many years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Marilyn Price?
Yeah, hi, thank you for allowing me to speak here. And my comments are on the issue of demand. Last week, I received an email from Resource Renewal Institute, an organization I worked with in the 1980s that was founded by Huey Johnson, who served as Governor Jerry Brown's Secretary of Resources during Brown's first administration. After leaving that position, he established Resource Renewal Institute in Mill Valley. And RRI, along with other groups, including the Sierra Club, is part of a new coalition that recently released a report entitled A Water Resistance for California. While the report focuses on Southern California, the executive summary of the report states that California must create a new urban water renaissance. That and it is a water renaissance for California. Sorry, I mispronounced that. So the executive summary of the report states that California must create a new urban water renaissance, an approach that prioritizes local water and local communities in developing reliable water supplies for the future. If the MMWD board and staff have not read the report, I hope you will do so and speak with members of the coalition that prepared it, including our Mill Valley-based Resource Renewal Institute. The experience with other water districts could offer useful insights into how Marin County can further strengthen local water conservation and not relying on importing water from other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, great. So that ends our open part of the meeting, and
We can
or
officially
public hearing.
close the public
Close the
hearing.
hearing. I guess I have a question for our general counsel. If we wanted to have a change in the vote, or potentially either delay or submit our July 1st submittal with, an action to have you guys relook at some of these projections by the end of July, is that something that we can do, you recommend, or can't do, or is it just a yay, nay vote?
I think the board has the purview to make whatever motion it thinks is appropriate under the circumstances. So that could be a request to move it differently than is recommended, or to, craft something that's slightly different than what's in the agenda package.
Okay, thanks. Any other board comments? Nope.
I have a comment.
Yep.
I don't think there's any downside to delaying the submittal of this report. It's kind of a situation where I don't think they even really look for it for a while. I think it's a good idea what Ben proposed to contact them and tell them it's coming, but I don't think there's any pushback or any punitive side of not submitting it on the first.
Director Kush?
Yeah, I agree with Larry. If there is no substantial downside, then I think I would like to better understand. Maybe not, I understand the discrepancies, but perceived discrepancies between the numbers in the report and what many feel would be more accurate, but maybe better understand how the urban water management plan does actually influence downstream decisions about water supply that we're making here in Marin, if at all. I don't know that we need to get into it today, but it is something that I would like to better understand.
Okay. Any comments, Director Mayor?
I still think that the report as written here, the conservative approach, I don't see the downside to, and I feel like we're struggling with amnesia coming out of the last drought, and we were all focused on more supply, take a conservative look. We don't know what's going to be happening into the future. We have no shovel in the ground on any project yet, but then we're trying to hold back on other components. For me, it doesn't square up. So I'd like to support it as is.
Great. And I'd like to recommend that we delay it, that we change this and relook at our demand projections and have them be more accurate, most specifically 2026. I mean, we're starting from an inaccurate number, and maybe we can look at other demand projections and water efficiency efforts. And so I'll make a motion that we delay this report till the end of July. And if there's a second, we can look at that. And if not, we can vote on what has been presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Director Sampson,
No.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Yes.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Smith.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. A little more work, but I think we're close. Hope that's not too much of a distraction. All right, we'll move on to item 8A, our capital program update.
Okay, good afternoon, Alex and I, Engineering Director. I'll be providing a PowerPoint on this. There it is. Okay. All right, so I'll be giving us a Q3 update on the capital improvement program this afternoon. So we'll be starting off with doing a CIP budget overview, looking at some of the larger capital projects we've been working on from 26 into 27, going into the Q3 expenditures for where we are, and going over some select capital projects that are currently underway, and then kind of just giving a touch on the next 2-year CIP for the upcoming adoption of the board that's going to be coming up. Okay, so starting with the CIP overview. So just wanted to kind of show this and share this with the board, just to see that, where we've come up since we originally adopted these rates. So historically, we've been around $21 million, as you can see here from fiscal year 12 to 23. And this graph really does kind of show the ramp up of the capital program as the rates were adopted, really representing a significant increase in our capital investments that we have, which have really helped us really target some of these projects that we have deferred for quite some time because of the lack of the resources and money. So this is really a great improvement. It's allowed us to tackle like the Tokoloma pump station project and eliminating the remaining redwood tanks in our system, just for example. In addition, the process is continuing to move forward using the existing resources that we have, whilst really strategically leveraging the use of consultants to keep the capital program moving forward. So some of the larger capital projects that are really multi-year really focuses on the bigger capital projects like the Atmospheric River Conveyance Project, which currently has completed the 30% design and is currently developing the draft DIR. We'll be looking at the San Geronimo treatment plant clarifiers with our consultant with our treatment plant master plan to identify alternatives for how we could replace those, as well as our dear and beloved Gibson Tanks project, which is currently in the starting fourth year of construction, that's on track to be completed by 2029. The replacement of the Hind redwood tanks replacements. Those are two redwood tanks that we'll be removing. And both the Tokoloma and Castagna pump station projects, which would really improve the resiliency of two really critical pump stations in our service area from Tokoloma, which will provide reliable pumping capacity from both our Nicasio and Suluhuli reservoirs, and Castagna ensuring we have resilient pumping capacity from the Sonoma County water. And the Suluhuli Pump Station Electrification Project, which we recently awarded an amendment to the contract to continue with the design on that. And AMI, which also recently underway. Staff are working on that, as well as ERP. So really, to get into the real meat of the discussion this evening. So looking at the Q3 expenditure. So here's a kind of a similar table we've seen in the past with a category of the different infrastructure categories here on the left. Adopted budget 67 million with an adjusted budget of $79.4 million, which is carried forward from fiscal year 25. Actual expenditures, as money actually spent to date, is $27 million, which represents 34%. But when you include the encumbrances on some of these contracts and projects, it's really $51 million, leaving a budget of about $28.4 million. And it's not squared, it's just $28.4 million. You want to make sure everyone's clear on that. So otherwise, that'd be a lot of explaining to do tonight. So just to kind of touch on some of those, I mean, even though that is a pretty significant amount of money, really, of the pipeline projects, there is $3 million left over in the FFIP, which we're doing strategically because we're working on some larger capital projects that we will be bringing to the board here in the next couple of months that will really utilize the remaining $3 million plus the additional $4.5 million that's coming in next fiscal year. So that's done strategically for that matter. Under the pump stations of the 4.6, 3.5 million of that is allocated for the Fairfax Manor pump station, which we're still trying to get the right of way so we could do the construction on that project. Under the storage tank projects, Hind Tank has about $4.8 million of budget that's allocated in there. There's been a little bit of slip in the schedule, which I'll talk in the upcoming slide, as well as about $800,000 for Gibson tanks, which will be carried forward into the next construction season. And last but certainly not least, under the water supply category, there's about $2.4 million in the AMI that's allocated for that. So when you factor, those four categories, 5 projects, that's about $14.5 million. And if you were to back that out of the actual remaining budget, that leaves you just shy of $14 million or 18%. So just wanted to make sure I pointed that out so we're kind of all on the same page here. So any questions? Then I'll keep going forward.
Go.
Okay. So now going into some of the projects underway, starting with the Bolinas Road pipeline replacement project in Fairfax. That's about installing, 4,300 feet of pipe. Currently, we're going and working out some challenges with the project, but we're looking to get those squared away in the next couple of weeks and restart construction. Our estimated construction completion was originally November. We're going to have to reevaluate that once we get an updated schedule and kind of figure out what the process is going to be going forward. Miracle Mile East, replacing 1,800 feet of 1883 lock converse pipe. That project has been awarded, is underway, and it's part of a 2-phase project. The second phase will be coming back later in the summer Winter for award of that one for 5,100 feet. And this first phase will be completed by August. Both Sleepy Hollow and Marin City are projects that just wrapped up this month. And I was just punch list items, just remaining things that we have to kind of make sure are done to ensure that there isn't anything that's kind of pending with those projects to get them wrapped up and closed out. And Marin City, I do want to point out that it's been completed 3 months ahead of schedule. So it was a really successful project to get that done. Storage tanks that are currently in construction include both the Scenic Avenue tanks, which is the replacement of one of the Redwood tanks with a new 20,000 gallon steel tank, and Gibson tanks, which this year will be doing the foundation, tank pads, and the wall construction. So this is where we're really going to start seeing what these tanks are going to look like. And both of these pump stations, both Tocoloma and Castagna, have really been a big effort to get out into construction, which we are now in. So this first phase, you know, the first 12 months, especially for Tocoloma, is really kind of going through the submittal process of the equipment. Likewise with Castagna, that one was awarded a little bit earlier, so it's already kind of a little bit ahead of the schedule. But both of those are looking to be completed. Tocoloma back in December of 2028 and Castagna in April of 2027. Pipeline projects in design include Palm Avenue FFIP, which is 1,400 feet of 4-inch cast iron pipe that's going to be replaced. And this is in coordination with a county project that's scheduled to rehabilitate the road. And similarly, the Hillside Avenue PRP, which is looking to replace 7,000 feet of 4-inch galvanized threaded pipe installed from 1902. Again, that one's ahead of a paving project. So those two FFIP projects plus the Alto downline, which will be relocating the pipeline outside of the railroad right-of-way in Mill Valley and Corte Madera, will be going. And there was a little bit of a slip in the schedule, which we'll talk about in one upcoming slide. That's why the $3 million is getting carried forward for handling those 3 projects, which are very substantial in size.
Alex, is that the Alto Tunnel?
That's correct.
Yes.
That's the one.
Mill Valley side.
Yes. And the North Marin Line Creek Crossing, which will be coming back to the board here later this month to do the first phase of that, which is the shafter valve relocation and installation of some pipe for that project. And then coming back later next year to install the 1,700 feet of pipe to replace one of the creek crossings. Some of the storage tanks and pump stations that are currently in design, include the Hine Tanks Replacement Project. This project is going to replace 2 of the 4 remaining Redwood tanks with 200,000 gallon steel tanks. Originally, this project was scheduled to be advertised this summer, but there has been a little bit of a delay, which I'll talk shortly about. Scott Highland Tanks is a typical tank recoating project, which where they're recoating the inside and outside of the tank, along with including some seismic improvements. And we're looking to advertise design, or complete design of that and advertise that project in the fall for winter construction, which is typical for our tank recoating projects. And Sulahuli Pump Station electrification, now that the amendment's been awarded, we're kind of getting right into the design of that project. And we look to make some pretty substantial progress this next fiscal year. And that would replace one of the 800 horsepower pumps with 4 smaller pumps, giving us up to 6 million gallons of capacity. And now going into some projects that are in design for dams include the Phoenix Bontempi, the Bontempi and Phoenix intake valves, which will replace some of the intake outlet valves in those dams. A contract has been awarded, designs underway on that. The Seeger Dam stability analysis is also currently started this week, so that's underway. We also completed the dam condition assessment, submitted them to DSOD for Sulahuli, Peters, and Seeger. Obviously, some rehabilitation work has been identified for Seeger. As you would imagine, design standards for dams nowadays were not what they are back in the 1950s and 60s. So we'll be coming back to the board with more updates on that here in July. And our dam outlet valve automation, which is a project that automates the downlet side or the downstream side of the outlet valves, so that way they could be operated during emergencies without having to send somebody down there to open the valves. So as far as our capital projects that were not planned, Fairfax Manor Pump Station, we're still working on right away on that to get that resolved so we can proceed with the construction. And recently there was a big main break on Tungsten Avenue in San Anselmo. It's a repeat offender as far as a pipeline that's failed in the past. It's caused some damage to businesses. So we were opening up a project to replace that 900-foot of section of pipe that includes removing 4-inch galvanized threaded pipe from 1909 and some cast iron pipe from 1969. So just touching on some of the project adjustments where we had a bit of a slip in the schedule. For the Hine tanks, when we got to 60% design on that project, we identified that the original easement we requested was kind of in the wrong direction. Our soil nails were sticking out in one direction and not going far enough into, so we have to do an adjustment on that easement to capture our soil nails. And we looked at alternatives to redesign the wall. It wasn't really feasible based on the amount of material we have to remove for the footprint of the tanks. So we're starting discussions with the property owner to readjust those easements so we could continue with the project and get that project underway. So that'll cause that to go back to advertising. We're thinking winter of this year. So there's going to be about a 6-month delay on that one. Alto downline, we've made some pretty good progress with Marin County Open Space District for the acquisition of the easement so we could realign our pipeline outside of the railroad tunnel. So we're looking to get that here wrapped up here in the next couple of months. And we're looking to come back and advertise that project in winter so that we can start construction in the spring. So as we kind of look forward into fiscal year 27, these are kind of like the big hitters as far as projects that we're going to be working on. So that's 28 large projects. That includes, the first 7 projects that are currently in construction, and then a whole suite of projects from number 8 to number 22, which are projects that are in design that are going to be wrapping up going into construction. And then the last 6 that are there are projects that are kind of be active in design, and at some point they will be going into construction. So just this list of projects right here represents $74 million worth of capital investments, just to kind of put things in perspective. So it's a lot of work that's underway, just moving things forward and really being thoughtful and strategic on how we release projects out for construction so we can address everything going forward, and that's in the capital budget. So that really leads us into the next 2-year capital project development list. So currently the Capital Steering Committee is working to identify projects for the next budget cycle. So, when we look at projects to identify, we're looking at criteria that includes regulatory compliance. So projects that we need to do because it's part of a regulatory mandate. Projects that provide the in-system improvements for additional flow through the system, looking at where we can increase flows from Sonoma County into the distribution transmission system and elsewhere within our area. Projects that address fire hardening and site security of both our pump stations and tanks. Currently, we are starting the fire hardening on the pump stations where we're doing all the vegetation management, clear all that zone 0 area, and then coming back to do the actual site security where we're going to be replacing some doors on some of the select pump stations that have identified deficiencies. And, really targeting or looking at some projects that do provide operational improvements. Like I mentioned, we're doing the dam outlet valve automation, which is a good project which increases operational efficiencies and really improves the process for operations all around. While we continue looking at single points of failure and what projects that we can see that we can incorporate into the next budget cycle to address. And then also looking at the condition of certain assets like that Tungsten Avenue pipeline that's had a history of breaks, main leaks, and everything. Those are the ones we want to target so we could, eliminate further breaks and damage to private property. And then also looking at projects that do provide a measure of risk reduction to the district. An example of one of those is our Wolfbag Ridge pipeline replacement project to get that pipeline from underneath Highway 101. So that's a high in likelihood, high consequence of failure. So we're working on the design to get that out of there. And then also looking at projects that address energy efficiency, which is, pump stations where we can improve efficiency, and then looking for solar opportunities at areas where we can incorporate that into the project. And if that wasn't enough, we also have to consider the ongoing multi-year projects like the Gibson Tanks project that we know is going to be completed in 29 and how that fits into the equation, as well as ARC and AMI and ERP. And then also on top of that, really looking at where these other larger capital project investments like the Ross Reservoir replacement, cismetal tanks, and the clarifiers fit into the next 5, 10, 20, or 30-year outlook as far as where we're going to kind of schedule these large improvements for so we could address them. So, the capital project list is being developed, and obviously it's an iterative process that will be, considered of the future rate setting process, which there will be more discussion with the board, obviously, as we move forward. So just to kind of wrap things up, the CIP is moving forward in a fairly good manner. Things do move as is normal. It happens, and that's why we're having an update, just to kind of make sure there's no surprises. But things are moving forward in a positive way. Staff will continue developing the next 2-year budget for future board updates in coordination with the rate setting process. And we will continue to inform the board of any CIP changes as projects developed, or if there's any refinements going into the future. And with that, I would
For comments?
take any comments. Thank you.
Sounds good. Alex, thank you for the update. Right off the bat, I get excited every time we get one of these because a few years ago, the big push and priority was let's start making up for lost time. And you guys are doing that. And also thank you for the clarification on the numbers, because some of those percentages were a little bit worrisome at first. Why weren't we moving this? But better understanding that a capital improvement project list is dynamic and you have to adaptively manage it constantly for factors out of our control. And the fact that you're moving 28 or 27, whatever the number was, 28, thank you, forward shows quite a bit. And then the other part of it too is that you've started the fire hardening component of that as well. And it'd be good to also start looking at the site security stuff in this day and age as fast as we can get that going.
That's a component of this too.
Awesome.
Yes.
Appreciate the update. Thank you. That was it.
Great. Director Meyer.
I just had a question about the long lead time on the pump station projects. Is that does that always happen when we have pump station projects? What is it about that particular equipment that gives us a long lead time, or is it just a fluke that it's happened 2 years in a row, I think?
No, that's a really great question, Director Mayer. Equipment for these pump stations, medium voltage gear, is not something that's sitting on a shelf somewhere. It's big, it's large, it's really custom. That's actually made for that pump station and the pumping capacity. So there is a process where we have to get the submittals from the manufacturer, have them reviewed by the engineering team to make sure they're going to be adequate for what we're trying to do.
I see.
And it's a back and forth iterative process that takes a couple of months. Once that's done and the equipment is accepted, then it goes into fabrication. So now we're competing with everyone else in the country who's trying to get equipment at the same time. So that's why these lead times are really long, especially for the switch gear, not VFDs, but switch gear, especially in the medium voltage range. So that's kind of the reason why there's such a long lead time. So as things progress, we get all the equipment about 12 months later. Everything is sitting in the yard of the contractor. We're ready to start construction, and then we'll continue the discussion on, especially for Tokoloma. That's fine.
Thank you. I was also like Matt. I was very encouraged that there was quite a few projects were not only being fire hardened, but being seismically retrofitted or kind of brought up to date. So really appreciated that. Thank you.
Great. Director Gush.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. These regular updates on the CIP are really helpful. I think we're starting to get a sense of the flow of the different projects, specifically on the Bolinas Road pipeline replacement in Fairfax. Can you tell us a little bit about how the challenges are being managed?
Well, we're actively working with the stakeholders, thank you, that have the interest in reviewing the excavations that's going on, and we're really being very sensitive to that process and being respectful. And it really has to cause a project to stop until we have a good direction and a good understanding between us and them, so we could continue working with the project.
So we're not there yet, though.
No.
We haven't finalized the mitigation for uncovering human remains.
We're close.
Okay.
Within the next 2 weeks, I feel we will be able to restart the project, and then that will lead to an updated schedule and more communication with the town of Fairfax to make sure they're aware of what's going on as well. It's the first time it's happened for me, so came through it.
Yeah, it was an unusual surprise, I think, for me, certainly. Yeah, and as you said, I think just, we've been so, I think the town of Fairfax was so appreciative at the meeting last week in terms of our communication around this project. And so that was really encouraging. I just, can't thank you and Adrian enough for, really giving that so much attention. So yeah, I think just keeping it up will be helpful, obviously, going forward. Alex, you said the capital projects for 27, I believe you said the budget's about 74 million. Is that what you're thinking about? Many of these were started in previous years. They will extend further. It feels like for the next 2-year budget plan, we're not going to be, this list at some point we're going to have to start to stabilize it right there. We're not going to be adding a lot of new projects because there's just so many of these that are going to continue forward.
And that's definitely a consideration to have a discussion at future board we could figure out how we develop the future CIP.
Right. So the prioritization list that you showed us and how you're applying that to make those
yes
recommendations.
Those are just some of but they're that kind of the key prioritization criteria we utilize.
Yeah.
But they're the important ones.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the update.
Yeah, Director Russell, any comments?
Yes. Thank you, Alex. That was a useful update. I don't share the viewpoint about the delay in projects. When I joined the board in 2004, there were $400 million worth of projects that were on the table. And the last number I saw recently, a year ago or so, was 400 million. So I think there's been a steady progression through the list of projects. I think that the scope has changed. Alex has a broader viewpoint, in my opinion, than previously existed from the engineering side. And I think it's refreshing to see that we do have progress. And I think that we're getting our arms around some critical issues. To that end, did you ever figure out what lock converse pipe was? Have you got that far yet?
Very thin walled steel, but I'm looking to get a piece of that when we remove it out.
It's not out yet, huh? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, thanks. It was a very useful update.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. I think when I've been pushing for this update, my intention was to see if there are any recommended changes that you have, given the fact that we have some revenue shortfalls with our demand shift and $9 million going into catching up with our investment in the Nicasio area and other changes. So as soon as you can, I'd love to see any recommended changes from our previous approvals so that we can look at how to balance our budget and maybe shift towards operating to our highest degree possible.
Yeah, we'll take, we could do that and we will do that. Maybe kind of think about what we bring to an upcoming finance meeting on that. What we're thinking now is a lot of that discussion probably happens, the bigger piece of it in terms of the upcoming 4-year rate process and prioritization and thinking about demand and revenues and how we hold it together.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any public comments?
There are none.
Okay, moving on to our BIFIP, Biodiversity Fire and Fuels Integration Plan. Thank you, Alex.
Evening, board members. I'm Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources. I'm joined with Carly Blanchard, our environmental planner, Carl Sanders, our natural resource manager, and Caitlin from Panorama Environmental, who's our consulting support on the BIFIP addendum. You'll recall that in December, Watershed Committee, we presented our annual BIFIP report, and as part of that discussion, we highlighted the need to advance some addendums to our EIR document for the BIFIP to help us scale our prescribed fire initiatives and really building on some of the success we've had in the last couple of years, implementing that work on the watershed under Carl's direction and leadership, and thinking about what the future of that work looks like as we continue to build that partnership with County Fire and conduct our work on the watershed. So I'm going to hand it to Carly to talk us through what the addendum includes and what we're bringing forward tonight for approval. And just note that this is an action item to make an adjustment to that document.
Good evening, directors. Carly Blanchard, Environmental Planner. Tonight, staff are bringing forward an addendum to the Biodiversity, Fire, and Fuels Integrated Plan Program Environmental Impact Report, or BIFIP PEIR, for board consideration. The BIFIP was adopted in 2019 and establishes the district's framework for reducing wildfire risk while supporting ecosystem health across watershed lands. Since then, staff have been implementing vegetation management and prescribed burning projects to reduce hazardous fuels, support ecological restoration, and improve wildfire resilience. Over that time, we've continued to build implementation capacity through on-the-ground work, coordination with fire agencies, and ongoing monitoring to refine our approach through adaptive management. In 2023, the board approved a prior addendum to the PEIR focused on increased vegetation management, specifically invasive broom removal. This addendum focuses on broadcast burning and would increase the current annual authorization from 180 acres to up to a maximum of 1,000 acres within areas already analyzed in the certified PEIR. This is an increase in implementation capacity and not a change in program footprint or a new type of impact area. It's also important to recognize that the broadcast prescribed burning depends on weather and fuel conditions, coordination with county fire and regulatory agencies, as well as air quality and smoke management requirements. Because of that, implementation is necessarily incremental, and it will take time to reach the full program capacity. The purpose of this change is to better align broadcast prescribed fire implementation with historic fire return intervals and regional wildfire resilience goals, while continuing to support ecological restoration objectives. Staff are recommending board approval of the addendum to support continued and expanded implementation of broadcast prescribed burning under the BIFIP. Staff and the project consultant are prepared to answer any questions the board may have.
Great. I'll just note that the executive summary is a good place to check if you have an interest in just seeing the specific elements of the BIFIP that are being revised in this section, but really it goes back to the management actions and then carrying forward all of the mitigation that was prescribed in the BIFIP.
Thank you for the update and for taking a look at what we can and can't do. You know, looking at the general manager's report from this month, we saw a significant amount of broom mitigation being done. So following up on the stuff that you've already built on, we're already seeing action and results. So thank you for that. Looking forward to that, especially with a 120 acre prep, something like that, close to it this week.
Yep. And I'll just note that that capital line on the watershed budget before will go down because of that significant amount of work on the in the broom and in the prep for those prescribed fires.
Great. And especially when something last night pops on Pulse Point at Ridgecrest and Pantel, you start realizing what time of year it is and why we're doing all this work. So one, I think great. And I think as soon as we can get to 1,000 acres a year, the better, because then we're going to have to crank it up for another one to try to align with that 10-year interval. So we're on the right path. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Nothing for me.
Director Kush.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Carly, the addendum that is in front of us today, does that require any type of environmental review or?
Do you want to talk through it?
Yeah, so the addendum is the environmental review. So we took a very close look at that program environmental impact report that was prepared for the broader plan and determined whether or not there were any new or substantially greater significant impacts that were identified. And we made the conclusion that there was not. So the EIR did have previous findings of significant and unavoidable impacts. There's no change to that.
Okay, all right. So this increase in the prescribed burn targets, they align with the existing EIR. That was the conclusion of the environmental review.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. That the impacts, are
And
addressed.
Matt, you made me think. So we're now raising sort of the target up to 1,000 acres. Is there an ideal number that we should be shooting for?
I don't want to take away from Sean and Carl what they're actually looking at, but roughly industry standard says between a 5 and 10 year fire return interval in coastal California. And so 22,000 acres, do the math. And so 2,000 acres is probably where we want to be, but that's a big jump from where we're at.
That seems challenging.
And I would think for context, think about the BIFIP coming into play was the first time we had gone into these internal parts of the watershed to start doing this veg management and forest restoration work. And we needed to do that initial work to prep these areas for the safe application of prescribed fire. And we've been at that for 6 years now, right? And we've been starting to implement this prescribed fire work. And as we put more acres on the ground in terms of prescribed fire and beneficial use of that fire, we'll be able to come back at scale eventually and be expanding that work because we won't be doing that initial understory vegetation management.
Right.
Necessarily.
So these efforts build upon themselves.
So I think we want to think about like how do we get to maintenance of our watershed with more prescribed fire long term.
I see. Okay, good. No other questions or comments. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Director Russell, any comments?
Just to thank them for their hard work. It was an interesting presentation.
Great. Okay, all good. So motion please to approve. Any public comments?
There is one, Larry Minikis. Go ahead, Mr. Minikis.
Yes, it's just very encouraging to hear that you want to increase the amount of prescribed burning on the mountain, and happy that this is happening. And as we continue discussions about major capital projects, some of these projects costing hundreds of millions, it's worth remembering that reducing wildfire risk and protecting the health of Mount Tam and the watershed may be among the highest return investments the district can make. So I encourage the board to continue supporting and expanding the work wherever grant funding and sound science allows you to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Great. Motion to approve our amended plan.
So go for it, Hannah.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Yes.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Smith.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, group. Future board meetings.
Yes, I'm just going to highlight the one important one is this Thursday. We're having our special Board of Directors meeting focusing on the Watershed Committee item, the Road and Trail Management Plan. It's at 5 p.m. at the City Hall, the City of San Rafael City Hall. Then next week we'll have our regular FAC committee meeting, and then our Planning Committee meeting scheduled for Tuesday, June 30th. And that's all I'll report on.
Great. No public comments on future board meetings?
No, there are none.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to move to closed session where we're going to discuss some real property negotiations and then over there. Thank you. Any public comment?
There are none.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We're reconvening from our closed session with no items to report. That was at 8:10, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Can it be?